During the week, Prime Minister Scott Morrison announced Snowy 2, a policy favourite of former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull, that makes renewable energy more reliably by linking it up with a hydroelectric power stations. It'll be given a $1.38 billion government funding, but of course the final figure is a lot more than that. We're talking about this not actually flicking a switch with electricity until we're dead and buried. I think it's about 6 or 7 years or something. Or hopefully we'll live longer than that.
I'm going to live longer than that.
Work is set to begin next week, and Labor has all but backed the project, so that's a suspicious red flag for a start. Anyway, with this Snowy 2, I'll just outline the questions we want to ask Judith. Basically, is this a battery or is it continuous supply? Because all they told us on the news was that it would supply 500,000 homes with electricity, but they didn't say for how long.
Yes.
Is it like that battery in South Australia where it'll supply 500,000 homes for about 15 minutes or something? Then there's a cost-benefit analysis. They've got to pump the water uphill to store it, and then you run it downhill to generate the electricity. Right?
Yeah.
Does it take more electricity to pump it up the hill to the storage than you make when you let it run down the hill to
You'd
create
have
the
to
electricity?
think so, wouldn't you?
I don't know.
That's just logical, isn't it?
Nobody's broken down the cost for us that I've heard.
Okay.
So even if it just helps a little bit, is it worth the billions of dollars that they're going to put into it? So, is she ready for us again? Let's try Judith Sloan again. Are you there, Judith?
I am.
That's better.
That's better,
You
Judith.
probably didn't hear most of that. We want to know about cost-benefit analysis. Is this a battery? Is it going to power 500,000 homes forever or for 15 minutes? What's the story here?
Well, I think, the story is, I think, I did hear a bit of your introduction, is that it's hellishly expensive and is likely to be ready at the earliest in 2026. So it was originally going to cost $2 billion. Now it's more like $4.5 billion. And that doesn't include the cost of the additional transmission, which will be required for it to actually help the grid. So I think, it's putting a lot of eggs in one basket would be one argument. So, but, you boys are smart, which is why I talk to you. It really does come down to the cost-benefit analysis, and I think there are some reasons why you'd feel very dubious about that.
Do you know if it's a battery or will it run continuously to power 500,000 homes?
No, it's a battery. So basically what happens is that it's what we'd call an arbitrage between low price and high price. So you pump the water up the hill when the prices are low,
like in the middle of the night or something.
Well, you probably now if it's windy or sunny, you'd use the low prices associated with certain parts of the day to pump it up. But I think our high school science is probably sufficient to know that actually there's a net loss of power of about 20% because it takes more power to pump it up than you generate and all coming down.
Just hold it for a second. So that is correct. We thought that. It is correct, is it, that it costs more to pump it up the hill than you make when you run it down the hill?
Well, no, it can cost you less because you pump it up the hill when the prices are low and you release it when the prices are high. But just let's think of it in energy terms, so forget the dollars.
Right.
You lose 20% of the energy in that process. That's inevitable. So really what it's saying is two things, that for this project to work, you have to have that variation in price. And secondly, you have to have high wholesale prices because in order to recoup the capital costs and get a return of $4.5 billion, you don't do that with low wholesale prices.
So it's predicated on the idea that electricity prices are going to stay through the roof?
I think so. Of course, they have been very parsimonious in terms of what they've released in terms of all those assumptions. I think the way to interpret this is I guess, in a way, an acknowledgement by the government there's an enormous amount of renewable energy that's flooded onto the market and will continue to flood into the market. And we're not talking so much about the solar panels on people's roofs, all that stuff counts for probably about 3 to 4% of energy consumed, but more the large-scale stuff. And the trouble with that is that it's intermittent, and so unless you have backup, then, we face an increasingly reliable system. And again, talking about what engineers, I have a lovely life because I'm an economist, but engineers talk to me all the time. I feel I should go into an engineering degree. Is that once there's more than 25% of renewable energy in the grid, it becomes extremely unstable, right? So unless you have some quite large-scale backup and also what we call inertia services to keep the grid stable, we're potentially in problem country.
I thought Donald Trump summed it up beautifully and very, very simply this morning in one of his speeches to CPAC in the United States when he said, "Honey, is the wind blowing? I want to watch television." I thought he nailed it.
Yes, look. The thing is, there is a role for different sources of power, I guess, and interestingly enough, I think wind will probably eventually go the way of the dodo, possibly replaced by large-scale solar. That probably has more prospectivity, actually. But it still comes back to the problems. See, take the case of solar. The peak electricity generated from solar is at 1 p.m. But the trouble is that's not when peak demand is. Peak demand is actually much more like 6 p.m., right?
When people get home from work.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so unless you have a system of economical storage, okay, not storage. If we have vastly expensive storage, you're still in trouble. Then you've got this disjunction between supply and demand. So we need 24/7 power, but we also need to meet the peaks. This is the Dublin joke, Would you be starting here? Absolutely not. But I guess the government is now scrambling to try and make the best of it.
Yeah, do you think they've done their homework on it, Scott Morrison, or is it just pie in the sky?
Well, look, I think there are several routes to Dublin, but the trouble is they all look pretty expensive.
No, it's Damascus you're thinking of.
I'm very. Can I just make, I guess, what is both a simple and a complicated point? The trouble with Snowy 2.0 to me is twofold. First of all, as I said, it's like putting a lot of eggs in one basket. And secondly, the engineering and the geological complications are potentially vast. And the thing is, you don't really know that until you get going, right? Mm-hmm. So they're saying this is going to cost $4.5 million.
You're talking about another opera house where they start off saying it's going to cost $5 million. It costs, what was it, 100 and something million?
Well, I was having a look today about, I'm going to write about the fast train, so maybe we can talk about that at some point.
All right. Okay.
So there was a little one in Victoria which was going to cost $50 million and it ended costing $800 million.
Yeah, that'd be right. That'd be right. All right, listen, thank you very much. You've cleared up a couple of things, and it was no criticism of the news people during the week because that's what they were told. It would power 500,000 homes, and that sounds fantastic. But what they meant was as a sort of a battery backup. Judith, thank you very much.